All right. So with the release of OpenAI Sora, I was inspired to record this video since I've been thinking about what I refer to as the MonoLogos Singularity for a while now, and I never get to actually producing a refined video about it, but I think there are some perspectives that I would love to share with the world that might be valuable. So Sora is this new text-to-video generation model by OpenAI, and it marks a jump to photorealism, or pretty much photorealism, in that modality, which is one of the last ones that we still need to cover with our generative AI. This whole category that generative AI addresses is what I refer to as the MonoLogos, which is basically externalized pattern represented through symbol systems. So I can tell a story verbally, and every time I tell it, it will be a bit different, because I'm in contact with the meaning behind the words that I use, which is something that is impossible to represent in a static symbol system. But I can write it down into, using literacy, into a static representation in the form of using symbol systems. And this, you can extrapolate that to any other domain, especially in the digital. Everything you ever encounter on your screen is of that type. It is externalized pattern in the form of a symbol system. This video, for example, is something that is represented in a symbol system that your computer can understand, you can't, but it's still of that type, that modality. And for the longest time, this modality was quite useful in making sense of the world, because there was an important asymmetry in the creation of it. Before generative AI, actually there's like a static progression, but before generative AI, it was actually very hard to produce photorealistic video proof of something. There was an inherent asymmetry in the amount of work one needed to put in order to produce a piece of content. If I wanted to, for example, see some politician, fall down the stairs or something like that, there was a time where the only way of me having such a video at hand would be to find that in reality and record it. Meaning like the work that needed to go into the production of the video was given by reality. And if I could find it in reality, it was close to zero. And if I wanted to simulate that, if I wanted to end up with a video, with a set of data making your pixels light up on the screen to represent what I was just referring to, the amount of work would pretty much diverge to infinity, meaning it was impossible. There was a time where it was impossible to simulate such a thing. Then we had, computer graphics came in, made it a bit easier, but still highly asymmetric. Only a few small groups with lots of resources could do that. Deepfakes came in, made that a hell of a lot easier, but still not trivially easy. And now with Sora and everything that will come after, it looks like it will be only a prompt. Basically anyone can do that. To the degree that this asymmetry between the amount of work that you have to put in if you just follow reality, if you're like truthful and earnest, that this amount will become, or on this side is the amount of work you need to put in to simulate it. This asymmetry will become more and more symmetric, to the point where actually the simulation side will become easier, because it will be so trivial to produce a video that it's, even if you know it's happening in reality, it might be easier to just to prompt it. So it will actually invert that proof of work, basically, that needs to go into the production of MonoLogos content. What this means is that any truth-based epistemology that relies on this asymmetry, aka, did it really happen? Do we have proof? This type of sense-making, of data-driven sense-making, will be more or less completely undermined. It already started with images, now videos. They're like, basically we are in the middle, maybe even more towards the end of the process of crossing the MonoLogos event horizon, basically, beyond which there is no inherent credibility in any piece of MonoLogos, period. And there's a funny kind of irony in that, because when I say truth-based epistemology, then the scientific method, the way we know it, is basically part of that category where you pursue truth. And out of that epistemology grew all the technological stack that we have today. So generative AI wouldn't be a thing if we wouldn't have discovered the usefulness of a truth-based epistemology. But now generative AI is exactly the thing. It is debasing its own substrate, in a sense, which I find a funny irony of history. So to kind of elaborate a bit more what I mean when I say truth-based epistemology, I'm using the term truth here as it stands in relationship to goodness and beauty. So there's this value sphere, as it's called often, this trinity of truth, goodness, and beauty. And in the West, in the weird culture that we find ourselves in, we have this strong bias to reduce the whole sphere on this one modality, trying to explain goodness and even beauty as simply some, edge condition of truth, or something that we could represent in truth. And importantly, as has been pointed out throughout the millennia by great minds, truth is relative in nature. Now I'm referring to lower T, truth, meaning if you only base your whole epistemology on truth, there is no absolute anchor point tying you to or guaranteeing a relationship to that which is real. You basically enter the realm where the simulation can become so all-encompassing that you don't even realize that you are in one. I like to refer to these two different types of epistemology, where one is only focusing on truth and the other is focusing on the whole value sphere, with truth and service to goodness expressing itself as a deepening of beauty. That's the way that I like to put it. I like to refer this duality of these two epistemologies as the domesticated epistemology and the liminal epistemology. And in a nutshell, domesticated epistemology focuses on relative truth, which means it can be radically manipulated in way too many ways that I could list here, but I guess everyone watching this probably has their own list of corruptive forces that rely on our blindness, that is an epiphenomena of only being focused on truth, statistics, stuff like that. And the liminal epistemology is the one that focuses primarily on beauty. And as I just said, like beauty, if you look at this trinity, then beauty is the most fundamental of the three. And a deepening of beauty is something that occurs when truth and goodness, where truth is the modality of thought and goodness the modality of feeling, when they are in right relationship, Beauty deepens. And goodness is an absolute. There is just, when you are in contact with the totality of your being, and you with your feelings, not just your thoughts, then there is no way that promoting whatever genocide or something like that will ever make you feel good in the same sense that it makes you feel good to help someone heal trauma or heal a relationship or something like that. There is an absoluteness to these dimensions when you are truly in contact with your feelings, with this modality, not just simulating it through thought, which I can attest to is something that one can easily do without noticing it. So, yes. One thing I would like to point out here is just to give it a bit more texture, how truth can basically be simulated easily. I remember a few years back, I heard Daniel Schmachtenberger talk about he had access behind the scenes, seeing where these language models were going, and said these things you can prompt it to produce like 10,000 different studies with true data that conclusively make the statement that either vaccines are safe or they are dangerous, for example. So basically, and they would only use true data and only use all these data points and relative truth to connect them to arrive at polar opposites of each other. This is a very good example of what I mean when I say the truth can be simulated quite easily, actually, especially by these large language models. And it is really hard to debunk these fake papers. Scientists, experts in the field, needed about 2 weeks to kind of fact check each of those to figure out if it's true or fake. So it's a shaky epistemology. Now the question is, what might the next step look like? What do we do from here? So here's my proposition for what I think this point in history is inviting us to, with the liminal epistemology as a new way of relating to reality that is actually not undermined but even supercharged by the MonoLogos Singularity. The first shift that we need to do is one inherent in the shift from domesticated to liminal mind, which is the correcting the bias of only focusing on content to enlarging it to primarily focus on the context. So what this means in a kind of sense-making modality is that instead of taking a story alone and trying to, extract all the information we can to judge if it's true or false, we focus on the relationship between all the stories we encounter. And we search for the most coherent way that they all fit together. So we do the dialectical thinking thing, which only really works if we also are truly liminal. Because if we cannot hold a story without judgment and just play with it, truly play with it, just try it on, then dialectical thinking becomes more like a simulation of dialectical thinking. We need to just take in all the stories we hear and hold them and then see how they fit together. I have like this analogy of quantum computing. So I call this the analog for sense making is something like quantum sense making. In a quantum computer, you move from bits to qubits, where a bit is like the classical thing, where it is either 1 or 0. In quantum mechanics, there is what's called the wave function, which is just this state of potential before the system was measured. And the measurement collapses the potential to an actuality. So when you measure the qubit, it becomes the classical edge case of either 1 or 0. But before you measure it, it is just in the superposition of potential and holds both simultaneously. I think this is the right relationship to story. It is to basically say everything I ever encounter has some distortion in it. It's impossible not to. Or noise, if you like. But it also has some signal. And I don't have to draw that line and define that rigorously when I encounter a story. I don't need to collapse the wave function to say this is the signal and this is the noise. Because maybe I'm just not ready to perceive some of that signal in there. Maybe my consciousness still needs to mature to perceive some of the truth, goodness and beauty in that story. Maybe I'm just, I still have some trauma to heal to take something really seriously. So the liminal epistemology just is like, okay, I take it and I know it's the superposition of signal and noise, and I don't judge what is what yet. And what I then do is just add more and more of these qubits to the system and try to perceive them as a whole. And the more I add, the more the right picture crystallizes. An analogy I like for that is back in the day, I think it was the early macOS operating systems where pictures were loaded pixel by pixel. So it was draw like line by line by line, and the picture would just show up in the final resolution. And if you now look at, I think it was Midjourney, but some of these generative AI image generators, they do this thing where they have the first iteration, it's very pixely and sketchy, and then they refine it and refine it and refine it. And this is kind of what I'm proposing here. You hold these stories. If you're new to an area, you just hold everything you hear, and you're like, I don't know, but I care. This is the important thing that is hard to really embody. But I will just be open to everything that comes in and hold it with everything together. And I don't need to kind of intellectually process all these possibilities and how it all fits together. But when I really enter in this liminal epistemology, I basically outsource all of that computation load to the stories themselves. Because if I just hold space for them so that they can come together and interact, then they themselves kind of self-organize into this thing that becomes more than the sum of their parts. And this is important here to understand like the relationship to quantum computing, because a quantum computer draws its unbelievable power, computation power, from exactly that type of phenomena. You don't squeeze reality into one state. It's either this or this. You use the fact that reality is much more trippy than that in that quantum computing system. And then these qubits all come together and form this vast amount of potential states. And then at the very end, you kind of prompt it and it collapses to the most coherent state that answers your request, your computational request. This is a very rough, intuitive understanding of quantum computing, but this is good enough to understand what's going on. The important thing is the ill-definedness of the states is what makes the system so powerful. And the same thing can be done when making sense of reality. And I propose that the best way to do this is to do so in dialogos, to talk to people, and kind of together form this container where we hold space for these perspectives that we bring in and see how they fit together. But what is also really cool about this and in relation to the MonoLogos Singularity is that now we don't need this cryptographic signature that tells us through even more monologous systems whether a monologous content is authoritative or not. Because what we have is something like a warm signature. If I talk to someone who encountered a video 10 years ago and he knows it and he tells me and I trust this person, then I don't need anything else. I have basically this warm embodied proof that this video existed before the MonoLogos Singularity came. And I think this becomes crucial and is one of these things that a very valuable thing that we have as a species and will keep to have, that we still have warm embodied memories of what came before the singularity. And basically then we can use the mechanism of the coherence beacon that I propose for Project Liminality, where we just say, oh, these stories fit together like this, don't they? And we send it out to everyone holding either of these, and then if it resonates, if it seems coherent, if it seems beautiful, people accept it and the signal propagates. And in this way, we can collectively tap into that kind of quantum sense making. And over time, the most coherent combination or the most coherent set of relationships that can hold all perspectives will crystallize. And that thing is, I would say, the closest thing to an absolute reference point that we collectively can arrive at. Or another way of saying it is like, if we all converge to the most coherent way that all the perspectives of everyone included fit together, I don't think that there is anything else that would be more desirable than this. And I don't care if that is then true or however you want to relate to it, but I think that is the thing that we want.